Michael Romeo Charlie, BMRC, LHX, L3 Harris Technologies signs definitive agreement to sell EOTech to an affiliate of
Hello, traders. It's 8:02 a.m. Chicago time on Tuesday, the 24th of March, 2020. Thanks for joining us on day number, what is it, on our shut-in here?
HST, Home Street,
Derivatives
and
trading involves
Certified by
substantial risk of
Federal
loss and is not
Economic
suitable for all
Consumer Reporting.
investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. This is episode number 1719, well on our way to episode 1800 and maybe 2000 by the fall. This morning, the overall
PTO
market
options
sentiment
provide
is
further updates
risk
concerning
on,
EOTech's
risk
agreement in
on.
relation to the business combination.
Traders are
Curtis,
piling in
Mr.
on the
Pope.
buy side. We are limit up or have been limit up on the S&P. We hit limit up at about 540, 539 Eastern U.S. time this morning and have pulled back quite a bit, about 30 points or so, and have now hit it again. We keep pushing up against 2333.50, which is the up limit. I want to remind everyone that there is no up limit on RTH. Up limits only exist in the Globex session. I saw someone posting yesterday that the up limit is the same as the down limits during RTH. There is no up limit. In any case, that's where we stand. The markets are allocating to risk. The DAX, huge up today, huge, 592 points in the DAX, up 6.82%. Gold is also ripping higher. Gold taking a huge, huge spike, 103 points on the April futures contract. Can you believe that? 103 points trading at $1,670.70, up 6.55%. The Euro stocks up 152 points, up 6.33. The Dow up almost 1,000 points at 928, up 5.02%. The Nasdaq's up 342 points at 4.91%. The S&P 107 points higher at 4.82%, and the Russell also popping higher, 43.7 points up, or 4.38%. Crude remaining still remaining at low prices, but also pushing higher, up 3.77%. Crude is trading at $24.24, up 88 cents. The bonds are taking a hit today as money is moving out of the treasuries, it seems, and into uh, and into risk assets. The 30-year bond, U.S. bond futures are down two handles and 22 ticks, or 1.5% on settlement. This is not yield. The 10-year note is off 25 big ticks, or 0.57. The Bund is down 50 cents, trading at 170.62. That's where we stand currently. Quite an amazing turn in the market after pushing lower yesterday, breaking that 2280 in the S&P. We'll go over that in a minute, but the overall market sentiment is risk on this morning. And this is kind of special because generally we hit the limit up and we stay there. The market has had several opportunities to pull back and has pulled back as far as 2301 on the S&P from the 2333.50. So this means business. Every time it has dipped this morning, we saw participants coming in and buying it right back up against the limit. It's hit the limit just now yet again. So interesting action here. Supposedly, this is being pushed as a result of the 2 trillion plus 2 trillion plus coronavirus aid package that is in the Senate. Also, the House of Representatives in the U.S. is putting in what potentially could be a bigger bill. Uh, the Secretary of the Treasury, Mnuchin, is saying that they are very, very close to a deal. So the market's anticipating that. And then on top of that, there's some comments by POTUS yesterday that there may be some lifting of restrictions on trade. So the market is responding a little bit to that. So we'll see what happens next. But overall, the market's really pushing higher. So the headline is President Trump suggests may scale back closures soon, and Secretary Mnuchin says they're very close to a deal on a stimulus plan. Um, and then also the ECB's come in and said there will be a major buyer in commercial player market. Germany's got stimulus put together and so on and so forth. So the market is really taking a pop here. So that's where we stand. That's the baseline of where we are. Let's take a look at what's scheduled. What's scheduled here this morning? This morning, there isn't. There's a big parliamentary vote in Canada on the coronavirus package that's occurring at 10 Central, 11 Eastern. Um, we did have new home sales in. Well, hang on. Why is this? This is off. Yeah, it's 9 o'clock. Okay. So we do have. So the parliamentary vote is at noon Eastern. We do have new home sales at 10 Eastern today. Feds Bullard is scheduled to speak at 9:45 Eastern, 15 minutes after the open, and we get market PMI for composite services and manufacturing. And that's pretty much it for the day. We have a 2-year note auction, and then we get API crude oil stocks after the close. And so that's where we stand. Let's take a look at what was expected yesterday versus what we got. Sorry, my voice has just been terrible. But at least today I have the right microphone turned on. So yesterday, here's what was expected in our review segment here. So the primary expectation is we were looking for it to open in range up against that 2280 area. The primary expectation is it's likely to turn up and then ultimately push into 2209 and 2209 and 2200. No, that's not broken glass. It's just a news article alert, a news flash alert from one of my feeds. So that's the primary expectation. Otherwise, the market's likely to drop, push into the 2223 area, take a bounce back up into 2280, and push higher, which is basically what happened overnight. Here's what it did. It it opened. God, my voice, man. It opened, it pushed lower, pushed back up, tested the prior range. We actually opened lower. By the time the trader bite was done, the market had already moved
Mnuchin says
a little
essential
bit
workers in
lower
financial services include wide range of duties,
and
including
opened out of
processing
range. It
financial
tested
transactions
the
and
prior
providing
day's
financial
range.
services.
It tested the prior day's range before in the 2280 area before the selling came. It just looked like it was really, this drop and push looked like it was done to the short side until it turned over and started pushing lower. Look at what it did here. It pushes in to almost to our 77, 2177, which is the next key area down, this gray area, the stock zone. And then it, it returns all the way up and pokes through for a
SLPE
neutral
Schlumberger says cutting capital
day
spending
type
by up
and
to
then gives it all up.
2%
This is a
at
market
2019
in
level.
the C word, not the four-letter C
Sandy
word, sorry,
Global
in
Schlumberger.
capitulation. This is a market that is basically getting two opposing forces pushing in both directions as participants are starting to see a reason to buy and are willing to buy at these low prices, and of course have been continuously willing to buy overnight. We went limit up pretty,
TSX still up
within a
66,
few
243
hours of the
utilization.
European
I
Open.
expect it to be in the low to mid
But it ended up
80%
finishing
range.
in
That's
what was a
opposite
pretty
the
balanced
X-ray
profile, double distribution.
company heat notes in
We
that.
fought this area pretty well, this low volume node, low volume node area,
That's
and
TSX.
built a high volume node on top of it. And now we are way up here. So to me, this is the beginning of a potential reversal and a short squeeze and so we're looking for higher prices this morning. So in terms of the scenarios, the scenario two was partially right, and it did break the low and the balance that we've had down here for some time since the March 12th, I think, and went lower,
New
broke
high
it and went
DAX.
lower,
New high
and now
DAX.
we're
New high
gapping
DAX.
up. And so we
New
want to
high
see, the
DAX.
first thing I want to see
New high
today
DAX.
is, does it come
New
back
high DAX.
and fill this
New high
gap or
DAX.
not? If
New
it
high
doesn't, then
DAX.
it's a gap and go situation, and we're likely to find ourselves up at 2400, which is key in this area. This is the composite point of control at 2400 here. That becomes the key target above, with a little bit of resistance at 2345. So that's how things are set up this morning. Here's what the overnight session looked like. It opened up and didn't spend very much time near yesterday's close before the 5 o'clock open right here, a tiny gap, and it has remained above mid, above VWAP this entire session. VWAP is this cyan line, mid is this blue line, and has been pushing, and we've had limit up, and we currently have limit up in a small pullback. And what this is setting up for is a pretty strong spring higher, in my opinion. So we'll see how that goes. In the order flow, here's what things look like. In the order flow, let me go back to the open. Look at all those offers above getting lifted, those orange areas. So here's the 5 o'clock Chicago time open. We swing back and forth. We push into this liquidity, absorb it, push higher into some liquidity, and then that becomes offered. Pull back, and then we continue higher into even more liquidity. You could see this had intended, of course, the limit up,
DXRX
limit
still
down
after higher
prices
pricing there,
pretty much
entering a swing
constantly
trade.
have a bid or an offer these days as people look to
Represents
get out
1.6 million
on
shares at 459 per share
on that trigger.
with warrants. That's Bravo X-ray, Romeo X-ray.
And so we hit our limit up. We'll be lifted at 8:30 Central, 9:30 Eastern, and the market's allowed to run at that point. So that's where we stand. There's not much I can show in terms of the full depth. The key areas are 2345 and 2400 above. So here they are in view. But given the amount that's being held here, it's dwarfing any liquidity that's resting up top. And so we'll see when it opens. This picture is going to change when the market is limit. The bids and all we've seen in the past is the market kind of slices through that limit pretty quick, usually gaps through, and off to the races we go. So one of the most important things to see today is whether or not the gap gets filled in the first hour. If the gap doesn't get filled in the first hour, then then I would be looking to trade pretty aggressively from the long side, and expecting the market to continue higher. Here's the composite chart. This is every bar represents one RTH session for the day, RTH only. And what we've done here is we've gapped down and we've been in this balance zone right in here until yesterday. And yesterday ended up testing lower, but also closing lower. To me, that looked like it's either capitulating or it's setting us up for a continued test lower. To me, that doesn't look like a market that has an excess at the low and wants to push higher. To me, this bar that was put in yesterday is potentially an indication that we're likely to pop higher and come right back. I'm not seeing an argument with a pretty good rejection, a hammer looking bar or something like that. That would make sense to me, but it really lingered down there. And again, this is a news. This is a news-based turn and limit up now. And to me, that is suspect. That is suspect. But in the short term, I expect that we are likely to continue to spring higher, and 2400 is the first key spot to test. After that, 2550 and so on and so forth. So we'll see what happens today. Today is likely to be a very telling day. One thing I brought up yesterday that I want to show you here is how, you know, now that we've got the rollover and expiration behind us, we still have an issue with liquidity, but look at how Friday was a selling day, but there was accumulation. It seemed like there was lifting much more aggressive than hitting. Again, a lot of that, or a good part of that, is because the bid is just not there to hit. And so price moves swiftly through the bid and does not register a high delta, high negative delta on the sell side versus offers putting a lid on movement up and getting lifted and then the market failing to go on. So just be careful how you read delta. It's tricky in these situations. But overall, just the magnitude of the delta, despite the sell-off, to me was very suspicious. I talked about this yesterday. To me, it just does not make any sense how aggressively this has sold while the delta was being lifted. I gave you the reasons why this may happen technically, but generally that happens on a short-term basis where prices slip through and there's not much selling delta, but price is lower, and so the delta is not moving down at the same rate or as aggressive a rate as the price. But in this situation where the entire day there seemed to be lifting, even though the market was selling off, tells me that somebody was buying or participants were buying on bargains. And now we could see that these guys are potentially ripe to get paid through this range in which this delta was formed as we're pushing up against limit up on our way potentially to 2400 or higher. This looked like accumulation to me, and we'll see how that works. Okay. So what else is there? Let's take a look at what's expected for today. Really key areas, really key plays today to pay attention to. Let me turn off my... Okay, so here's what we've got today. Really important to pay attention to the action today. Here's where we are. We are opening in a gap up on a pretty steady base, in my opinion, right down here at 2280. The expectation is an open auction that gets responsive, looking for it to maybe drop to 2300 or so before it turns back up, and then I'm looking for it to push into this 85 naked point of control, 2400, and then potentially push 2400 and settle up here. I'm looking for a very bullish kind of play today, as the primary scenario. So if it does not fill this gap zone in the first hour, there's a historical probability, past performance not indicative of future results, historical probability of around 81 or 83%. I think it's 81% that it's likely to not get filled by the end of the day if it doesn't fill in the first hour. Now, it's a statistic. It's a statistic. It doesn't mean your trade has an 81% chance of working. Your trade still has a 50-50 chance of working. Your very next trade, not to close it by the end of the session, likely. So if that's the case, then I'm looking aggressive on the buy side. And again, I'm going to look to push the 23.45.50 area, 23.85. So these are your key areas right here. The squiggles, 2385, and then 2400. These are key areas up above. Above there, we start to move into 2547, which is where this resistance has been up here. So that's the main scenario for tomorrow. Okay. The secondary is it opens and it squeezes up. It's not likely to open in an open auction. It squeezes up and it starts up here. And then I'm looking for the same kind of thing where it pulls back to the limit up level, which is 33.50, 23.33.50, attempts to push higher, and then gets us an impulse down, and it starts to push towards 22.80, and it can go probably potentially down to 22.46.50, this area right here. And again, the beginning of the composite low volume node only to hold steady at 2280. That's the selling scenario. I'm not expecting sellers to be very aggressive today. The news is somewhat baked in unless something changes, unless the Senate deal blows up, unless the House of Representatives in the US do something, unless the Canadians do something, who knows? But that's the selling scenario for today. Okay? I'll leave you with those two ideas. It's time for the market to open. Good luck, and I'll catch you tomorrow morning. Convergent members, we're having our trade talk today. We're going to walk through the market and answer some of your questions. Trade talk is at 1 p.m. Eastern. Good luck. I'll catch you soon. Take care.